Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Divisive Care Connection. I'm Keena Dill, program director here. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Nicole Dauz. She's a self-care coach and advocate who has committed to choosing happiness despite her circumstances. She's the proud mother of a neurotypical son and a daughter with a rare genetic disease and autism. Her mission is to change the story around caregiving and celebrate the journey. She honors the role of the caregiver by helping them recognize their worth and their true gifts. As a self-care coach, Nicole works with family caregivers who feel overwhelmed and at the end of their rope. Thank you for joining us today, Nicole.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to start with a few slides. I will share my screen before I introduce myself more fully, because sometimes, as they say, pictures speak 1,000 words. So first of all, I wanted to, these are my two beautiful kids, my greatest teachers. I'm here to share my lessons learned, but I am both a teacher and a student of life. So my daughter is Summer and my son Jordan. So Jordan is 15 and Summer turns 13 in November. And so I always start by saying, this is how I want life to be, because we're doing this virtually. So much of life happens online. And these three beautiful photos, you could already create a story in your head like, oh my goodness, she is adorable. They're at the playground having so much fun. And wow, look at the kids, just wonderful siblings sitting in a hammock. They never argue. And then my son and I, after winning gold at a basketball tournament, it looks so idyllic. And I know as caregivers, we're often online and we see these photos and it can hurt our hearts, because so much of what we experience as caregivers goes on behind closed doors. And we don't share necessarily, and we're certainly not taking pictures. But at the beginning of COVID, I did, because this is my reality. These are not photos that I share online out of respect for my daughter, but it's something that I share as part of my presentation with fellow caregivers, because you understand. Way back when, in March of 2020, school stopped abruptly, and I stayed home, became a full-time caregiver to my daughter. And it was really challenging because of her intellectual disability. She didn't understand what was going on. All she knew is that she no longer went to school. She no longer saw her two friends that she has. She only saw mommy every day. But this is what having a child with a rare genetic disease and autism looks like. And as I said, these are the moments that I actually thought of grabbing my phone and taking a picture. But yes, and this is actually to help you better understand. I don't want to just tell you, oh, I understand how you feel as a caregiver, or I understand some of the emotions that you have felt, because many of you are caring for someone with dementia, and you may say, well, you don't understand, Nicole, because you're a parent of a child and it's different. But what I'd like you to consider, and my perspective, is that as caregivers, we share an experience, because at the end of the day, there are a finite number of emotions. So I believe we've all experienced the feelings of anger, frustration, resentment of having to be a caregiver, and then the shame and the guilt for having that resentment and anger and frustration. And so even though our experiences may be very different, they all happen behind closed doors. We've all felt loneliness. We've all felt like we're the only one going through this, even though we know there are millions of family caregivers. So that's what I believe connects us. And that's why I feel so passionately about talking about caregiver well-being with all caregivers. And so now I wanted to just get into my self-care philosophy. And I hope by sharing this you can take a deep breath and let your shoulders drop, because I really love to remove all excuses and barriers. I'm like, we can do this, because I believe self-care, we all deserve it. We're all unique individuals. And guess what? There's no right or wrong way to do self-care. I mean, people are always telling us, oh, you're doing that wrong, or you need to do this better. But that's the beauty with self-care. I believe self-care is anything that brings you joy, as long as it's legal. But just by saying that, it allows you to look at self-care in a different lens. And that's why I'm like, when did it become so complicated? So if we're able to step back and say, Nicole, are you telling me that I like to garden and gardening can be self-care? I say yes. And if someone else likes to knit, that can be your self-care activity. It can be that simple. Now, just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. And we'll get to that a little later. But also with the self-care, there's no judgment and no comparisons. Just like being a caregiver. We don't judge and we don't compare, or we try not to. But the reason what I say is no judgment and comparison is, I always use this cheeky example. One of my daily self-care routines is to cuddle with my cat. There's just something magical about hearing a cat purr. But I have a friend who's allergic to cats. So she's not going to compare, oh my goodness, Nicole cuddles with her cat and I don't, so therefore I'm doing it wrong. And so it's just like, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, because at the end of the day, the self-care routine is about honoring yourself. So I only care about Nicole and what brings Nicole joy. And I celebrate every other caregiver who finds their own activity to bring them joy. So one of my favorite quotes from Wise Buddha is that you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. And I know that sometimes the weight of our caregiver cape feels so heavy. And I know that sometimes finding 5 to 10 minutes a day can in itself feel overwhelming. And I know it can be the stories in our head of, but you don't understand, or, but I can't leave the house. And so that's why I bring it back to, if you can find any activity that brings you joy, you don't need to leave the house. You don't even need to leave the room of the person from whom you're caring if you need to watch them as they rest. And you don't need to spend money. And you have a lot more control over self-care activities than you believe. And that's what the rest of today's presentation is, I hope, going to help uncover. And so that is the fun part about this presentation, is that it's going to really help you say, oh my goodness, I'm able to do so much more. And for me, that is so empowering. And let me tell you, to be able to empower other caregivers is such a gift, or is such a gift to me. Say, oh my goodness, if I've helped someone move the marker, if I've helped someone realize that they can find time in their day, then life is good. So a little bit about me is I've been a caregiver for 12 years. And for the first 5 years, I was in denial. And I'm sure you can all appreciate that. And denial being, my daughter was 18 months when a chief neurologist at the Children's Hospital said, your daughter is severely delayed and we're going to need early intervention so she can learn how to walk. So we started weekly physical therapy so she could learn to walk, which she did at 2.5 years. And then weekly occupational therapy so she could get a pincer grip, put on socks, hand over hand to dress herself, and use a spoon and a fork to assisted feeding. Speech would come much later. But at the beginning, I was in survival mode, and I'm sure you can relate. It's just the appointments, the therapies. I was working full time. I had a very energetic 3.5-year-old who was like, mommy, pay attention to me. What about me? And why was his younger sister getting all of this attention? And so 5 years into that caregiver journey, my body wasn't listening to all of those signs. Our body's always talking to us. And part of embracing self-care is really learning to understand how our body talks to us and gives us little warning signs. I call it our personal GPS. And just one day I ended up, I was at work and I was having trouble breathing. And as you can imagine, it's a very disconcerting feeling for it to hurt. To breathe, and I couldn't take deep breaths. So there was shallow breathing, and I just had to bang on my desk to get someone's attention. And then ambulance was called, ended up in emergency. And after an hour of waiting in the emergency hallway, when the doctor finally saw me, my breathing had resumed to normal. And he's like, wow, you're healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. And I went, oh no, oh sugar. Like, what just happened was not normal. And then I realized there are no doctors who specialize in caring for caregivers. Nobody really understands what we do. Nobody understands the emotions that we feel, and we usually just pack them away, put them away for later because we need to focus on caring for our loved one. And that was when I went, oh, one more thing I need to do. I'm responsible for taking care of me. Uh-oh. And so that became my journey and my path of learning more about self-care. And I started 7 years ago by going to the gym 3 times a week. And so I'm up here and I'm like sharing on my love for self-care and everything I do. Keep in mind, that's after 7 years. At the very beginning, it was, okay, 3 times a week, I'm going to go to the gym. And then I fell in love with feeling better. And then that was the commitment of, okay, when I'm a better person, or when I feel better, I show up with a little more patience. Maybe my energy's a little better. And then lo and behold, my daughter recognized that, and my kids responded better to that. And so it was actually a positive cycle for once instead of the negative one. So everything that I share are lessons that I've used, strategies that I've used. And on really challenging days, I still use them every day. So they are tried and true. So one of my first ones that I love sharing, and I still laugh. I mean, I speak about this for years, and I still remember the first time I did it. It's called the Control Audit. So just visually in your head, it's really simple, 2 columns. And one is called things I control, and the other list is things I don't control. And when I thought long and hard, I was like, uh-oh, there's really only 2 things I control: my thoughts and my actions, and reactions. And everything else in my life went under the things I don't control. Originally, I had my daughter and son on the list of things I can control. Like, that's why I still laugh at myself. Like, really? Like, why do we think we can control our kids? And I was like, oh, sugar, like, I'm in trouble. I have been spending so much time and energy, and I can't control them. So after like getting mad at myself and then laughing at myself, I was like, okay, so I can let those things go because I can't control how my daughter will show up. But I do not, indirectly, but I do know that when I show up in a happier or a better mood, or even with my tone, indirectly influence how she shows up, etc., with my son. And so I still need to remind myself of that in 2021 and during COVID and all of the changes. But I have used it now as a way to really empower me to say, okay, if I'm really honest in this situation, what can I control and how am I showing up in this situation? So I share that, and I ask you to, try that today or tomorrow when there's a situation. I mean, when you think about it, I used to complain about the weather. I used to complain about the way friends were showing up. I used to complain about stupid things other parents would say to me who weren't caregivers. All of these things that I would let impact me, but I had no control. And so I share that. So if you can, when you're in similar situations of, maybe someone's giving you advice about how to care for your loved one, but yet they have no idea what you're going through. It's like, okay, how can you control how you react to that situation that's better than maybe you did in the past? So now I'd like to share with you my favorite self-care tips. And the beautiful thing about these three is that they're free. You can do them from anywhere. And, you know, we're coming up to, well, in October, Thanksgiving's in Canada. I know it's November in the States, but, you know, around holidays. So sometimes transitions or traveling can be more challenging for caregivers than if they're just changing the schedule of their loved one. So that's why these are really helpful as well, is you can kind of put them in your back pocket and they're always with you. So the first one is breathing. And you could be like, okay, thank you, Nicole. I'm already doing that. But I guess I should say intentional breathing, because a lot of us, we don't even realize it when we're you know, feeling worried or rushed or, you know, focused on caring for our loved one. It's called shallow breathing. Like we don't even take the time to take like deep breaths. And the intentional breathing one, it's called box breathing, because you start by 4 seconds. So you breathe in for 4 seconds and you hold for 4 seconds and you breathe out. And as soon as you start doing that, you actually send a signal to your brain that you're safe. And so what this does, it allows your body to relax, your heart rate will slow down, and it will even your blood pressure. So has a very positive impact for your body. And so the nice thing about this is you can start by just repeating that 5 times. And say, you know, you wake up and you can find yourself maybe getting a little anxious, or you got a text or email from someone that made you mad. Just take a moment, take those 5 deep breaths. And that's just enough, because when you're focused on your breathing, you're not focused on that email. And so that again is a little bit of a break. And then when you go back to that, maybe you have a little more patience or different perspective before you reply to it. And if something really upsetting happens, then maybe you do that deep breathing for 10 times, or you repeat it for 20 times. And then if you do it for a couple of weeks, you can increase it to 5, 5, 5. So you breathe in for 5, and that's the flexibility with it. You get to adjust it to what works for you. And I think if there's any message around all of these self-care activities, it's what works for you. I share all of these as inspiration. So the next one is hugging. And, you know, during COVID, I was so thankful that I could still share this tip, because we care for a loved one. It means that there's someone that we can hug. Now, I appreciate not everyone is tactile and not everyone likes to hug. I'm very thankful that my daughter is tactile, and hugging actually has been one way, I call it our language, because she's only started to speak at 10 years old. So before then, I would hug her as a way of saying, I love you, and like vice versa. That was our connection. That's how we really calmed each other down. And very similar to the breathing is the research is coming out showing us that like, well, the research isn't showing us that we crave connection, but the benefits of hugging. So similarly, when you hug someone for 5 to 8 seconds, your heart rate decreases, your body relaxes, and again, you send yourself a signal that you're safe. And the nice thing, I combine the two, the breathing and the hugging. So for example, when my daughter gets upset, I will hug her, and sometimes she will resist, and I still hug her. And after about 10 seconds, I can feel her body relax, and then I'll start to breathe. And I'll prompt her. I'll say, we call it B breath. B breath. And then I'll make auditory sounds for her. So I'll go, and then we'll do that for about 4 or 5 times. And eventually she'll join me in the breathing, and I can fully feel her body relax. And it is a way to reset. So she's gone from feeling agitated and upset, and then I'm usually frustrated as well. And then I'm able for both of us to participate in the hugging and the breathing. And then when that's done, she forgets that she was agitated, and it allows us to then move to another activity. And my third one are mantras. So this is something that you would say to yourself. And two of my mantras that I use are, it's not her fault. And I know, like, sometimes I've felt really embarrassed or guilty about sharing that the first time. Like, not that I ever blamed her or thought it was her fault, but when I actually came up with that, it was like, oh yeah, it's not her fault. She has a rare genetic disease. Her brain actually doesn't work like other brains. And it's like it allowed me to find a new level of compassion that I didn't have before. And so that is my go-to mantra. So when she breaks something or throws something or acts like those photos that I showed, I'm able to say, Nicole, it's not her fault. And it's that 1 or 2 seconds. Again, talking about what we can control, I can control how I react. And it's like, if I can sneak that in of it's not her fault, then it catches me. And then usually I can react in a way that I'm a little more proud. And then my other mantra is, I love you, I love you, I love you. So sometimes, as I said, when I try to hug her, when she's feeling agitated and she resists, I will just whisper to myself, I love you, I love you, I love you, love you. And that also helps calm me down. So again, options are limitless for the different mantras that you could come up with. But those are my 3 top self-care tips for caregivers, as I said, that you can have in your toolbox, in your back pocket at any time. And so now comes the interactive part. Now comes 3 really fun activities. So whether you are, I'll open up my chat box here. So whether you want to share things in the chat, or as I said, Kina said that she was going to, turn on. So the first activity is you're going to make a list of 10 sentences, and they are I am sentences. So this may be the first time that any of you have ever even thought of this. So it can be a little challenging, but work through it. There's going to be resistance, but trust me, it's a very powerful exercise. And it is I am plus a positive adjective. So easily, our mind, the stories in our head, oh, I'm lazy, I'm stupid, I'm forgetful, I'm clumsy, etc. No. We are caregivers. We care for other human beings. We are amazing people. We are patient. We are kind. We are loving, right? We are funny. We are joyful. So I would like you to write a list of 10 sentences of I am. Okay, so we're going to take a few moments. So if those who are brave enough to add a couple in the chat, I'm going to add a couple of my favorite in the chat to inspire others to share. And those who are in person participating, feel free to either unmute and share, or Kina can add them to the chat as well. So I'll leave you to that. Thank you, Susan. Those are great. I am loyal, I am dependable, I am a fighter, and I am honest. Do you mind, since you were the first one, Susan, how did that feel to even take a moment to think of yourself in that positive way? Because really, as caregivers, I believe that we're so outward focused and so few people ask about us. Catherine, I am happy, I am amazing, I am love. Yes. Teresa, I am kind, determined, happy, smart, thorough, organized, loving, trustworthy, loyal, and spiritual. Love it. You guys are awesome. Susan said very uncomfortable because before you said positive, my mind went to all negative thoughts. And I know, and that's the default. And I think that this is why this is such a powerful exercise related to self-care, because self-care is how we show ourselves we love each other. We can say we love each other, but if we don't believe we're worthy of the action, then we don't do self-care. And so you guys have been so forthcoming in all of these wonderful attributes about yourself, then maybe you can go, I guess I am worthy of caring for myself, or I am worthy of taking time for myself. And like, oh my goodness, no one ever says these nice things about me, but then it can be empowering to say, oh, I am responsible for filling my own cup with all of these amazing positive attributes. Oh, I can remind myself how worthy I am. Alana, I am a child of God. I'm capable to do all things. I am loved. I am an advocate. Susan, it brought me to my tears to my eyes. I know. And that's why it is, I think, so important to do, because it is true that the negative feelings usually appear first. And we call it reprogramming or building a new muscle. So wouldn't it be wonderful if when the words I am pop into your head, that positive comes to your mind first? That is the muscle that we're building. Because I can only appreciate, and this is from stories that I've heard from other people who are caring for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, that sometimes there can be confusion and they may not also always say the nicest thing to the person from whom they're caring. And because there's confusion. And so I can, my daughter doesn't talk a lot, so I don't get that. But, even from my son, he can be a little lippy sometimes and likes to highlight all of my faults. And so it's that reminder of, okay, I am the one who has to really ground myself and remind myself of who I am and what I do well, because no one's perfect. And I love so many people put in here that they were loving, because the point is that when we choose love over fear and love over jealousy and love over anger, we're able to see ourselves in our best light. Rosa, I am kind, funny, and resourceful. Yes, caregivers and resourceful kind of go hand in hand, but I love that. Alana, this is the third day in a row I've been in a group who asked, oh my goodness, really? Oh, that's a hoot. Oh, look at you. That's why you're,
Nicole, I want to say that when you started that, it really resonated that God is talking to all of us, that we need to be thinking about who we are.
Yes. I love that perspective. Thank you. And, just to, of the, and I know God makes different things to different people. But yes, certainly we are all children of universal God. And I love that you shared that perspective. That's so important. Perfect. This is great. I am blessed. Catherine, I'm blessed. I'm healthy. I'm a child of God. I am strong. Yes. And I think that's part of it as well. With the, going back to the control audit and things we can control, what I realized, and one of the most frightening things about being a caregiver, is having no sense of control about not only how my daughter is going to behave, but the future, right? And that's when the worry and the fear and those gremlins can really take over. But when you start with, I am blessed, like, oh, I can control that. And even having, people speak about the importance of gratitude all the time, but by even starting your day and grounding yourself with, I am blessed. And I am not alone in this world. I am not alone on this journey. That in itself is such, I think, a beautiful reminder to help us get through all of the challenges that may arise that day. So the next exercise is, I'd like you to write down 3 things that you're proud of. Okay, so 3 things that you're proud of. Ah, perfect. 3 things that you are proud of. Wonderful. So Bell Scout said she's proud of her, or I hope she, proud of her stamina, patience, and kindness. MJ said, rising to the occasion, my compassion and not giving up. And Rosa said, letting go of past relationships. Teresa, my kids, my relationship with God, and my determination. Susan, for one who has never painted, I've painted 4 rooms in my house now that people can count on me, and for being a caregiver when it'd be easier to walk away. Oh, wow. Yes, to all of those things. And I appreciate if you've never painted and you painted 4 rooms, that's amazing. Good for you. Yes, people can count on you. And I think it's so true. Being a caregiver, I mean, I say it's not something that we ever signed up for, but it's something we would never not do. And I think when we can come to that level of compassion and grace for ourselves, take a moment to step back from the craziness of the day or the unpredictability of someone else's actions, it really helps ground me and remind me that I'm not doing such a bad job. Or when we look back and we sometimes cringe, or I sometimes cringe, I'll be like, Nicole, you were doing the best you could do at the moment. So if everyone has the proud things, oh, Kina, I am proud to take my personal caregiving experience to give back to others, proud to be a survivor, and proud to be compassionate toward others. Lovely. Rosa, give her space, allow myself and her to fail and make the choice to change. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, Alana, raising two responsible sons, being an advocate for family caregivers, and purging my house. Yes, and I love the variety in these things. And that kind of goes back to the theme, like there's no right or wrong, it's whatever you feel. And really just being okay with that, saying, yeah, this is what I feel to that question. And it really demonstrates we're all unique human beings. And I think that's something to be celebrated. Okay, so the next question is, what are 3 things you forgive yourself for? Oh, Catherine, I am proud of myself for stepping up to the plate to take care of my husband without any training. Yes, definitely something to be proud of. Okay, so the next thing is 3 things to forgive yourself for. I will go first in the chat and share, yes. And if you want to just share one thing, that's okay. You don't feel like sharing, that's okay. I think for me, it's just if you can take a moment to think of those things, it can just help us release them when we just take a moment to think, what are those things that I can forgive myself for? And then when we do that and release them, it really does make us feel a little lighter. And that actually is part of self-care. The forgiveness and letting go is, in the end, it may not feel good in the moment when you're thinking of that thing but once it's released, it will make you feel better and a little lighter. Mm. Thank you for sharing, Bell Scout. I forgive myself for overreacting when my husband is being irritating. Susan, for when I wasn't kind or compassionate, for comparing myself to others, and for not valuing myself. Yes. I forgive myself for not being a perfect caregiver, for getting easily frustrated and having very little patience. Yes, these are all such, I think the two, sorry. I forgive myself for being impatient at times. I think it's important to share these to help others relate, because I know the first time that I shared that with other parents, they're like, you yelled at your kids? And they were so surprised. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame for even sharing that and thinking people would judge me. And then it was like, oh, okay, I thought I was the only one. And it kind of goes back to that caregiving experience of no, like, we're all human, and there's no perfect parent, there's no perfect caregiver, there's no perfect spouse, partner. And it's just really focusing on that compassion and that grace for ourselves, and that at that moment, I was really doing the best that I could. I forgive myself for being impatient. Yes. Okay. And then we'll end on a fun one. We won't end on the forgive one. And the other 3 is, what are 3 things that you're committed to? So, for example, I am committed to like loving life. And I say that, you know, and a lot of people don't like, I know so many caregivers don't like saying that, or sorry, hearing that. But the reality is those things that we control, like we can choose to have a happy life or an unhappy life. And I know that sounds like really dramatic, but that's really it. The opposite of choosing happy is choosing unhappy, even though we may not think of it that way. And that's why I believe self-care has become this divisive word. It's like, don't tell me, you know, how to act or what to do, but I like to approach it from a different way of just saying, we're all so worthy. We deserve happiness. We deserve a meaningful life, regardless of the condition or the diagnosis of the person from whom we're caring. And so one of the things that I'm committed to is how can I like make the most of this day? How can I appreciate what I have? You know, I'm committed to loving life. I'm committed to choosing love over fear and anger. I'm, you know, choosing love over all of those other negative emotions that seem so readily appear. And I'm a work in progress. Kina, I'm committed to learning, growing, and chasing happiness. Oh, I love that. And I think I love that, the growing part. And it's so true. It doesn't matter how old you are. I think the idea of wanting to learn, community, speaking with others, and that's part of the beauty of sharing our experiences. If you can have someone look at their caregiving journey in a different light and lead them down a path that's a little more positive, I mean, how rewarding is that? I'm committed to my faith, keeping my husband safe and cared for, and asking for help when I need it. Oh, asking for help, MJ. Yes, that's a good one. That's something I'm just getting a little better at. Teresa, I'm committed to caregiving, God, and caring for animals. Yes, animals are such soothing and I think wonderful, can be a wonderful part of our self-care routine. Susan, acceptance of the situation and caring for my husband. Yes, acceptance, living in the present and choosing positive over negative. I actually did a presentation on Monday with March of Dimes Canada about acceptance, the importance of accepting your role, and how if we never accept the role, it's really hard to move to the other stages to get to happiness. So respect, Susan, that you acknowledge that you've accepted your, you know, the situation and being a caregiver for your husband, because that is so important in moving the marker. Okay, so the last activity before we go to the Q&A session is I'd like everybody to take a moment and write down or think of one person whom you love and with whom you feel safe. Catherine put, I'm committed to staying positive and stay at peace. Oh yes, peace, inner peace, wonderful gift. So again, write down the name or think of a person whom you love and with whom you feel safe. And if you want to, pop it into the chat. Makes it more powerful when you write it down. And I've had people share that they don't have anyone. And in that instance, I say, if you have a pet, you can put your pet's name down. Because it's the same, the outcome is the same for this activity. Nancy. My person is Sue. I love my husband, Steve, and I love my pups, Asti and Baby Bear. Oh, that's great. Okay. So the reason that I asked this question, and I always end the activities with this question, both children live close and support me. Wonderful. So Maya and my husband, Art. Nice. Now, for everyone who has thought of someone or people, and there's no, again, that's fine. I want you to take a moment and I want you to gift yourself the same love, grace, and compassion that you so easily gift the people for whose name you wrote down. And when you really sit with that, how powerful is that? My husband and my cat Pepper. Let me repeat that. Gift yourself the same level of love, grace, and compassion that you so easily gift the person or peoples whose name you wrote down. And that, I hope, will help move the marker as well on your self-care journey.